Here's one of the few senators, Senator Angus King, who actually understands what the role is of congressional members. He says it. And this is the title. It's published by the Bulwark under How to Fix It with John Avlon. There's the date it was posted. There's the URL up at the top. You can stop at the ampersand T=390, which is where this is going to jump to.
When we stand up there and become senators, is to defend the Constitution. And here's a really interesting phrase from a historical point of view: from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I think it's very interesting that the framers anticipated domestic enemies of the Constitution. And that's our job. And to say, well, the courts will take care of it. In my speech the other day, I went through this long list and said of what we could do in the Senate. And I said, do our job. So that's the reaction is sort of avoidance, I would say, more than anything. They really don't want to confront the centrality and the importance of this issue. They're hoping it will just sort of go away.
Which is a definitional.
So, basically, what he's saying is protests are not going to work. We can't rely on the courts because the court's jurisdiction really doesn't cross over. The laws cross over. So, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment picks up the law and brings it into Congress, where Congress can actually prosecute the matter. And, as said before many times, you identify the law violated or rebelled against, and it's not violated by accident. It has to be intentionally thwarted and rebelled against, which, much of what Trump is doing is absolutely clear. And then you find a public record. In Trump's case, he's just leaving all kinds of public record behind. And then you distill that to a resolution, much like that impeachment resolution from Representative Thanedar, and you file it. And eventually it's going to have to come up for a vote. It's filed as a privilege resolution. Approximately, I guess, 2 days in the House and 10 days in the Senate. If they don't vote on it, then Section 3 of the 14th Amendment kicks in automatically, because it amounts to a no vote to excuse that conduct. So if they do vote on it and the conduct is excused in one house by reaching a 2/3 majority vote, it has to go to the other house and accomplish the same thing. If not, Section 3 kicks in and that person is then barred from office, removed from office, and ejected from the government. Not just the federal government, but any government in America. So Section 3 of the 14th Amendment takes care of all this. All this Chicken Little whining, and just like Senator King said, they just want to sit back and don't want to do their job. They don't want to confront the reality that, they have to support the Constitution. Don't gaslight the American people going out there talking about, look what he's doing, look what he's doing. Look what they're doing. This is wrong. That's wrong. This is illegal. That's illegal. You are the ones with the legal authority, literally, to stop it all. To stop Trump and any other officer that you confirmed as members of Congress and throw them out of government. I encourage you to go listen to the entire interview. Senator King is one of the few people in Congress who's got a head on his shoulders and not up his rear. This is David Feldman. There's the URL up at the top. You can stop at the ampersand T=1880 because that's where this is going to jump to. He's there's the full title, and this is the date that it was posted, May 6th. He's got this tongue-in-cheek style, half attempted dry comedy routine. I don't care for it, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. So he's calling names here, and he's jumping to the one part where, you know, he says one of the many parts where he says something that's meaningful. I mean, you literally could take Debbie Feldman's show and distill it by clipping and editing out his crap. And an hour-long show would be probably a 15-minute broadcast, because most of the stuff he says is just whacked. But anyway, here we go.
Despite what Trump wants you to believe, Putin is the dictator, not Zelensky, and it was Putin who invaded Ukraine. Bernie Sanders supports more weapons for Ukraine and none for Israel. So, I'm often asked, how do you know what to believe? Well, Bernie, Ralph Nader, Howie Klein, Jasmine Crockett, Elizabeth Warren, Jamie Raskin, Katie Porter, Cori Bush, Pramila Jayapal, and AOC, to name just a few. That's how you do your own research. You listen to people who traffic in the truth. So, do I have any idea how to solve the Middle East or Ukraine? Not really, but I know Bernie does. It's called representative democracy. We elect people who we can trust, not liars like Donald Trump, who told his Secretary of State, stop flying around for world peace. That's what he told Marco Rubio. Stop flying around. His Secretary of State, he said, stop flying around trying to find world peace. That's what Mr. I can solve Gaza and Ukraine on day one is now saying. Forget about it. J.D. Vance.
So you sort of get the point. He's just got to fill it with so much, you know, crackerjack opinionation. But anyway, he's right. He called a few names out there, except Jasmine Crockett, Camilla Jayapal, Jamie Raskin. Let's add in Eric Swalwell. They aren't doing their jobs. So that's BS. Their jobs, as Angus King said in a speech recently, which is coming up next, their jobs are to support and defend the Constitution. And in this particular case, Mr. Trump has been allowed this ridiculous free rein long enough. There is enough evidence against him to literally fire him for what he's done since taking office. But that's not where it starts. Where it starts is January 6, 2021, where he provisionally disqualified himself. And I have to say provisionally because so many people don't understand. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does not activate until an amnesty vote is taken on the final sentence of Section 3. Section 3 is only 2 sentences. The last one says, you know, the Congress can relieve that disability. So the disability is automatic, but it is not actualized until a no vote to relieve the disability occurs. Or until that person doesn't reach which means the person doesn't reach the 2/3 majority to relieve the disability in both houses. And it's getting to the point where it's irritating now because no one seems to know how to talk about the law. You got everybody calling names, you know, making jokes, trying to make like Trump is stupid. We know that. We know all of this. You know, this is gaslighting the American people at this point. Because you need to do your job like Angus King said. It's Trump versus King. Do your job, support and defend the Constitution. The Constitution says what Trump did January 6, 2021 disqualified him. And the Supreme Court of the United States passed it to Congress and said, you have to act on this in Trump v. Anderson. You have to act on this, and you can do it at any time. Did anybody in Congress get it? No. They're all still Dumbocrats. They're all still sitting there twiddling their fingers with their heads up their butt. So the bottom line is real simple. People like Feldman, everybody who's out here reporting on everything that Trump is doing, you need to shut the F up. Until you can get under the Constitution and understand the country that you're living in, and that these people who are charged with supporting and defending the Constitution do not need to be in a majority. It only takes one person in Congress to file the proper resolution to cause an enforcement of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And in that resolution, it needs to outline all of the acts that are in violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, along with an identification of the proofs of the violation of the acts. And this is rebellion, not insurrection. Stop saying the word insurrection. Insurrection does not happen unless it's an armed conflict against the government itself. That means like a bunch of people get some weapons, they go out and they attack an army base or attack Fort Knox, attack anything, they have to actually attack with weapons. You can incite an insurrection, and that's criminal, but you cannot be convicted of insurrection so easily. And make no mistake about it, to be an adjudicated insurrectionist, you have to be adjudicated in a federal court. And that's what the Trump v. Anderson ruling said. And these people who are thick-headed, like Jessica Denson, she just can't get it through her head. This is not how it works, how she thinks it works. It does not work that way. And you know what? Nobody's listening to her. And while they're not listening to her, they're ignoring the whole thing because of people like her who keep screaming, Section 3, Section 3, Section 3. And then they say the Supreme Court shot it down and needs legislation. Well, they don't understand what legislation is. Because legislation is a resolution in personam with someone's name on it that they violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. There is no legislation for Section 3 of the 14th Amendment because it is an in personam amendment section of the Constitution. It is always directed against one person at a time. So the only thing in Congress is a resolution that takes the form of a censure motion that identifies the conduct that rebels, is in rebellion to the Constitution, that then, if it can't reach a 2/3 majority vote to excuse it, then Section 3 is activated. Then they're barred from office. Then they're removed from office. Then they can't take office anywhere in any government, anywhere in America. So many people have got their head up their butt, I just don't know what to say. I can't say I've never seen this before because no one has ever seen this before. Well, at least not in recent memory. And they won't look in the history books to see how it's done, like the Supreme Court showed how it's done through in personam private legislation on page 8, referring to footnote 2, when it was last done to excuse the transgressions of Section 3. But it can works the same way. If the excuse does not happen, you don't reach the 2/3 majority vote, then Section 3 is activated and you are barred from office. This is the full Angus King speech. I'm going to jump in the middle of it where he might be talking about impoundment of funds and how it's Congress's duty. But I encourage you to go listen to this entire speech. Now, it's very sad. that in Congress, they seem to think that making these speeches is getting something done. I don't friggin' get it. Who do you think you're talking to? Today, we have video where they can talk to the American people through the internet via YouTube. American people have no power. You are the one standing up there with the power. Instead of wasting your time on the floor, putting this speech out, which is an entire collection of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violations. Go back to your office, draft a resolution, put it all there. Prove it in the public record, file it with the clerk, and eject Trump from office. As you say, do your job. Let's see what he's talking about.
The free press has been a sign of incipient despotism throughout history, and right up to today. He's used the power of the government, including the impoundment of congressionally appropriated funds and threatening tax-exempt status, to threaten and intimidate private universities in order to force them to adopt policies to his liking. Again, a power found nowhere in the Constitution, nowhere in Article 2. He's enabled a national program of arrest and deportation of individuals in this country with no due process whatsoever. And even when it is admitted that at least one such individual was sent to a foreign prison by mistake, he's refused to make any effort to return that person to his home despite court orders, including a unanimous order of the United States Supreme Court. Did he do so? This entire process is a violation of the 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendment.
Well, that's a lot.
And certainly is not consistent with his obligation to faithfully execute the laws. He's openly suggested the possibility of sending U.S. citizens to a foreign prison for undefined crimes, thereby placing them outside the reach of our criminal justice system, including the constitutionally guaranteed right to counsel. He's abused the limited powers delegated to him by Congress in connection with tariffs and trade, by declaring emergencies where none exist, and single-handedly plunging our economy into chaos and risk of inflation, unemployment, and possible recession. A perfect example of the dangers of one-man rule. The Constitution...
So, I think at some point he goes on and explains how Madison in the Federalist Papers defines one-man rule as tyranny when he collects all the powers of the 3 branches of the government, blah, blah, blah. Great, true, yes, but still not in the Constitution. It's in the Articles of Impeachment that Representative Thanedar put together, but it's not in the Constitution. It is not an actionable cause of action in a court or in impeachment proceedings. It doesn't belong there. But what he's just stood here and described in these few minutes is enough of a claim to put into a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation. Document when he did it, what articles of executive order he's talking about, when it occurred, and then file it in the Senate and see if he gets a 2/3 majority vote to excuse all that. And if he doesn't, then guess what? Trump's gone. There's no impeachment necessary. Now, Angus King is 81 years old. He's still just as sharp as I would expect anybody in Congress to be sharp at 81 years old. Bernie Sanders is 83. He's still sharp. But Donald Trump, 78, is not sharp. He's never been sharp. He's not a lawyer. And even though Bernie Sanders is not a lawyer, and Angus King is, and was once the independent elected governor of Maine, one of the only governors ever elected as an independent, it illustrates that he is the type of person who should be governing. But standing on the floor, running a speech, is not the way. Love the speech. You should go look it up yourself. There is the URL up at the top. There is the full title. It is on his homepage, Senator King's homepage himself directly. And the date it was published was April 29th. I encourage you to go listen to it. But in the end, he does not present the solution, which is, he should say, close his speech by saying, and it's for these reasons I am filing this resolution to call for the amnesty vote to excuse these transgressions or not. And which time Mr. Trump will need to leave office. That's how this should conclude. It doesn't conclude that way. Here's how it concludes.
Career to fight for justice and the rule of law. So here I stand. Abraham Lincoln came to the Congress in the midst of the Civil War at a time when our forebears, like us, were reluctant to face the responsibilities that had been thrust upon them. At that critical moment, this is what Abraham Lincoln said.
Does anybody care?
Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. We of this Congress and this administration will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor
And really,
to the latest generation.
all those words are just burning us.
I deeply hope that in the midst of our fiery trial, we will choose honor and the Constitution.
What do you think? This is some kind of damn, TV show. Please. Well, this was the next thing that comes up is the whole con is a thing. Not going to stick for that.
Our next
But it's,
topic
look
that
at
we
it.
would be speaking about, each one is so dangerous
It's
to America.
Dumbocrat
Each one-
Schumer.
In each one,
The only way this can happen is for the United States of America to be the dumbest people in the history of civilization. We are the dumbest people in the history of civilization. I know you don't like math. I'm really bad at math. I need a calculator for all this. Okay? I'm not good at math. We are the dumbest people in the history of civilization. We're not the wealthiest country in the history of civilization. We're the dumbest. We have a $30 trillion a year economy. Half of us don't participate. Dumb. You're dumb, America. Wait. It gets worse. Donald Trump, the capo di tutti capo of stupidity, Donald Trump wants to charge $1,000 for migrants to apply for political asylum. This is in direct violation of international law. Under international law, anyone applying for political asylum must be taken care of, and given a hearing. You don't charge, you're not allowed.
And that's where I'm going to stop because he said it. It's correct. He's saying it in reference to something else. I'm posting it in reference to even allowing a liar on the ballot and racist and then electing him. So if he was legitimately elected, because there's so much information now about vote tampering, it doesn't appear he was legitimately elected. But then once he was elected, now you have people with this realization that he has done everything illegal from the first day. And for 100 days, they've let this go on. Now people are talking about impeaching him. Well, that's dumb, because that will leave his entire administration in place, when the mistake was that he should have never been allowed to be sworn in. When the mistake was constitutionally, his votes could not be counted before the amnesty vote was taken to verify that he was eligible to take and hold office. And the Democrats didn't put up any kind of fight. They were all afraid of Trump supporters. They were all afraid for their lives. And so, not only did they let him into office, they let all of his cronies through congressional oversight to stop them from ever taking office. And is anybody really surprised that this is what it's turned into? How many people really thought that he was not going to do this right here now? If you really thought, well, maybe you didn't know his history, but if you knew his history and you really thought that the man was not evil, you're nuts. Jessica Denson talks about how she was sucked in and she was a Trump staffer, blah, blah, blah. Well, ding dong, lights are on, nobody's home. Most anybody could see that. Many people were saying it before he even ran the first time for office. And then his first administration was somewhat of a nightmare. And then after he suggested injecting bleach, anybody with half a brain should know that he's stupid, because that came right out of his mouth. Just rolled right off his tongue. To even think that you could do that, I don't know. All you can do is stumble over words. And then he's reelected. He's allowed to stay on the ballot when the Supreme Court said Congress has to take him off the ballot, and they can do that at any time. They didn't act. They're thinking, oh, this is legislation we'll never get through the House. Instead of just reading the order, the Supreme Court said it isn't needed. Legislation, full-blown legislation, is not needed. It just needs to be an amnesty vote. Nope. Lawyers and non-lawyers alike in Congress, nobody read it. Everybody just felt, oh, we're defeated. Supreme Court shot us down. We got screwed. Supreme Court did no such thing. Supreme Court told you how to work it. And nobody looked. Now everybody's screaming, impeach him. And that will leave his entire administration in place, with Vance elevated to the president. And who do you think's going to be behind the strings, behind the stage, behind the curtain, pulling all the strings? Donald Trump. Unless the Democrats, the Dumbocrats, grow a spine and start kicking out people left and right using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, we will not have a government anymore. Because you can't let all of them in there. Donald Trump isn't doing this. He's just demented old fool. Everybody else below him is doing this. You need to watch this entire video with David Feldman. He tells you Stephen Miller and Stephen Chung are the ones in there pulling the strings. And these are two racist dumb bums. There's a picture of Stephen Miller, that he's photoshopped, sitting next to Hitler. I don't really care for this tongue-in-cheek crap of David Feldman because he wants to talk about America's dumb. No, he's dumb. Earlier in this very same show, he talks about his nephew not able to even spell his last name correctly. And then he puts it into the show like it's supposed to be funny. Well, then you know what? That doesn't speak very well for his genetic intelligence either. Now, I know these people have all been sent notices on how to correctly remove Trump, and it ain't impeachment. The Constitution provides a method to remove him from office because he's illegitimately holding the office. And all you have to do is wind the clock back, because it can be done, after all, at any time. And if the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation occurred before he even ran for office, well, better late than never. The January 6, 2021 is the controlling violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and if that's voted down and his amnesty is not forgiven, then his presidency never occurred. Every order he signed, every executive order he signed is invalid. Everyone who Congress placed in these positions is nullified. The whole administration is sucked up, vacuumed up, and kicked out of government, but not their acts. Anyone who did anything illegal, well, they're able to be prosecuted. You know, the only one enjoying immunity is Donald Trump himself, and even then, he does not enjoy immunity from Congress. Congress can still throw him out under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And any of those official acts, well, now, whether they're official or not is called into question. Because if he wasn't really the president, then they weren't official acts. So it's kind of ugly, but the reality is impeachment is not the way. Well, that is Stephen Miller. This is Brian Tyler Cohen. There is the URL up at the top. There is the title. And here is the date. It was posted May 6th. I don't care for Brian Tyler Cohen because he's a wannabe lawyer who's now dressing like Scruffy, who interviews Glenn Kirshner a lot, and that's okay, except Glenn Kirshner is long-winded. He makes the right point, but the wrong way. So we're going to start and then zip to the end. You're welcome to go look this up and watch the whole thing yourself.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, I want to put a tweet on the screen from Stephen Miller getting into this really dangerous legal area. Stephen Miller wrote, "The right of due process is to protect citizens from their government, not to protect foreign trespassers from removal. Due process guarantees the rights of a criminal defendant facing prosecution, not an illegal alien facing deportation." So basically, Glenn, this is Stephen Miller justifying the elimination of due process for people in this country. So first and foremost, is what he is saying legal and accurate?
You know, Brian, it's hard to understand how somebody can be so hateful and so wrong all at the same time.
And let me stop there, and we're going to zip to the end. I don't know how correct or incorrect that might be. Because if you assume that the Constitution only covers citizens, then Miller is correct. If the Constitution covers anyone who sets their foot on American soil, then Miller is incorrect. But in the end, we've generally accepted that everybody's entitled to due process once you set foot on American soil. And while it's a gray area, I will say this much. You can't just look at somebody and say that they're a gang member or an illegal threat to America, whatever you think they are. Because that's prejudice. That's racism. That's not what we want. But let's put all that aside and zip to the end and listen to what Glenn Kirshner has to say in closing.
To uphold the Constitution, and now he says,
Yeah.
I don't know if I have to uphold the Constitution. But here is the thing. None of this is winning him any fans. Among the trial court judges, all of the federal trial court judges, the federal circuit courts of appeal, the appeals court judges, or the Supreme Court justices. And I'm really looking forward to some of these cases that are in litigation right now, making their way up to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court now has an embarrassment of riches of evidence of Donald Trump basically thumbing his nose at not only the Constitution, but federal court orders, including the Supreme Court's order to facilitate the return to the United States of somebody that the Trump administration unlawfully, unconstitutionally deported to. You know, Brian, it feels like this is a man who not only is unworthy of the office of the presidency, but who needs to be impeached and removed. I mean, I don't think he was absent on the day he was sworn in, and he took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and now he says,
Yeah.
I don't know if I have to uphold the Constitution. But here's the thing.
Here's the thing. You act like Donald Trump has a brain. You act like he has good sense. You don't account for the fact that he's a 78-year-old man, more than likely than not, in dementia. It's elder abuse to have ever let him even take the presidency. He's not qualified. He's not an attorney. He doesn't know the law. He hasn't served in public service ever before except his first term, which was disastrous. And you keep giving this pro-per idiot a chance. You keep talking like he has some form of intellect. He does not. He's got people around him whispering in his ear or yelling in his ear, whichever it might be. And that's what's going on. We have others at the hand of government. Stephen Miller, Stephen Chung, everybody else who wants to be pulling a lever of power is back there pulling a lever of power because Donald Trump is weak. All you have to do is compliment him, suggest something to him. He says, yeah, let's do that. And you say, oh, you're so smart. That's a great idea. Glad you came up with that. And then Donald Trump in his dementia has been just convinced that he came up with something that somebody else planted in his head. This is how America is stupid. And impeached and removed? No. Annulled and removed. That way, his entire administration goes with him. So, I'm getting tired of these types of YouTube content creators who are a little scruffy here now. He doesn't even wear a suit anymore. Doesn't even try and look presentable. Is asking these ridiculous questions like he's surprised too. I don't get it. Yeah, you need to file the amnesty vote resolution. Bring it to the floor, both floors even, and remove him. Annul his presidency back due to what he did on January 6, 2021. And remove him and everything he brought into government with him and turn the clock all the way back to January 20th. And unfortunately, at this point, you have to instate Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Now, Harris can resign. It would be nice if she would, because I don't particularly think she's qualified either. And Walz could resign later after he appoints somebody who who's better. I don't know. I don't know who it could be. I'm not going to throw out names, but there's a host of people who could be better. And right now, since nobody in Congress has come up with the way to get rid of Donald Trump, or has even tried, it doesn't look like anybody in Congress is better. The only one that I've seen that's really kicking some dust up is Governor Pritzker from Illinois. And he's doing a good job of running Illinois. You know, and there's Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, and he's doing a good job of running Pennsylvania. You know, so it's the dumbest thing in the world to keep talking about this. Somebody needs to take action. It's not protest. These protests have nothing to do with actually getting the job done. Trump is never going to resign. Nothing's going to force him out. And if it results in an impeachment, it's going to leave us in a worse situation than right now. Because right now we can remove the entire administration. But if you impeach and remove Trump, then you can't get rid of the rest of the administration. You brought it all in. And if you get rid of him, you get rid of the ability to get rid of all of them. Americans are stupid. This is Lawrence O'Donnell. On Monday, after the interview with, I believe, Face the Nation, where Trump is asked, doesn't need to support the Constitution, and Trump answers, I don't know. There's the URL up at the top. There is the full title, put up in MSNBC. There's the date it was posted. I'm going to let him talk.
And one day in the basement of the Hart Senate office building, my life changed. After I filled out an address and social security number form for my first real job. And just when I thought I was finished with everything I needed to do in that otherwise forgettable moment in a forgettable looking office space, I was suddenly, and very much to my surprise, told to raise my right hand. I was then asked to repeat words that I had never heard before and have never.
So, the long story short, he was sworn in, and he was sworn to support and defend the Constitution. He goes on and on about that a little bit. You know, these media types want to do the big monologue. Let's zip to the middle, where maybe we can get a clip of Trump saying something stupid.
Business and investing and economics than Donald Trump ever will. Warren Buffett, the self-made billionaire who was not born rich like Donald Trump, told his Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting in Omaha, Nebraska this weekend just how destructive Donald Trump is without ever saying the word Trump.
There's no question that trade can be an act of war. And I think it's led to bad things. Just the attitudes it's brought out. In the United States, I mean, we should be looking to trade with the rest of the world, and we should do.
You get the point. He's saying that Trump's picking a fight with everybody and thinks they're supposed to come to him and beg him to drop these tariffs that he's launched.
Arena of what is now exclusively Republican comedy, and that is making jokes about the Pope and the papacy. Here's a couple of right-wing Republican Catholics playing in the comedic field opened to them, to their glee, by the death of a pope.
Now, an ex-Vice President, J.D. Vance, actually was very funny, remarking, quote, I think it could take on a bit more. If only there was a job opening for a devout Catholic. When does conclave start? I think the 7th. Here now with more is Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Mr. Secretary, you got to admit, that was pretty funny.
And you got to wonder, what is wrong with them when they think this is funny? The death of the Pope is somehow funny, and by somebody implicating that Trump should replace himself. Now, in this very same clip, Lawrence somewhere has a picture of Trump posting himself as the Pope. And that's just a bridge too far.
No, we thought about it, but you have to. It's an unmarried Catholic male. You don't have to be a priest. People don't know that. Any unmarried Catholic male can be Pope. But I got married and I'm happily married. So I know you. And by the way, you're.
Easy, might not be clear, but if Pope Paul VI had died in 1967 and President Lyndon Johnson put out a picture of himself as Pope like the one Donald Trump did, every member of Congress in both parties, every member of Lyndon Johnson's cabinet would have unanimously agreed that the president had lost his mind. Today in the Oval Office, Donald Trump said, "The Catholics loved it." The only Catholic who claimed to like it was Donald Trump's vice president, who has been a Catholic only the last 6 of his 40 years of life. The man who exhibits economic dementia every time he talks about tariffs said the Catholics loved it. The man who can't remember his oath of office when asked about it in a television interview said the Catholics loved it. After the bishops told Donald Trump directly, "Do not mock us," Donald Trump said the Catholics loved it. You can never know what stupidity is going to do next. It always surprises you. It's impossible to anticipate stupidity because it has no logic. It is disconnected from reality. I was not expecting Donald Trump to post a picture of himself as Pope. How could I expect that? How could anyone expect that? Stupidity without power can be easily ignored, but when stupidity has power and you never know what it's going to do next, then you can always feel the danger of that stupidity. And you have to...
And you get the point. How effing stupid can you be? I mean, almost anybody would have enough brains to know you don't do that. But that's Trump. Demented or not, he's always been that way. All the way back to the time he talked about how the Indians did like Indians, and he was in the middle of a gaming board hearing to try and get a casino license. It's in one of the other videos we've posted. Go back and watch them all. The clip is in one of them. Let's end with Rachel Maddow and her typical tongue-in-cheek, tattletale postings. Like, she does not get it. The American people do not have power. They can protest all they want. And Donald Trump will never resign. He is not shameful enough. He has no shame. He's on a mission to destroy all of this. And there is nothing you're going to do except throw him out of office. It's not going to work any other way. People are wasting their time, wasting their breath. There's the URL up at the top. There's the full title. She happens to talk to the co-founder or founder of Indivisible. And here's the date it was posted, May 5th. Now I'm just going to zip into this one because I'm just tired of this shit.
Since the first year of his first term in office, he has wanted a parade. And not just a normal parade, he wants a military parade. After Trump in his first term saw a military parade in France for Bastille Day, he said he wanted to top that. He said he wanted something bigger than...
And that's just a child. That's just mentality of a child. Okay? Do you not see that?
That. Something more like the...
Let's leave that. Tanks.
From the faith community, whether you're a veteran, whether you're an activist, whether you're a teacher, you can be part of this. As you mentioned, there are 100 events so far. This has been up for the weekend, available to register events. I would expect over 1,000. We saw 1,100 for May Day protests.
Wow, like that's going to do anything.
There is going to be a future post-Trump era, and I'm still going to be a law firm. I'm still going to be a business. I'm still going to be a university. I'm going to have to contend with my...
And it's mouth. You aren't not getting it. you've got a criminal in the government. Stop talking about him and start thinking in how do you remove him. A protest is not going to remove him. Start thinking how you're going to remove him. How you remove him is constitutionally through Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. You know, oh, the Supreme Court shot us down. Read that again. Read that Trump v. Anderson ruling again. They did not shoot you down. They shot down the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado cannot do that. The state of Colorado courts cannot do that. You cannot adjudicate that in the state of Colorado. You cannot adjudicate him an insurrectionist in the state of Colorado. It has to be in a federal court, and in a federal court of proper jurisdiction. Or Congress can do it directly. And then they said, you know, Congress, you need to do this directly. So basically they left it at the point where, hey, Congress, you can pick up this ruling from the state of Colorado and take notice of it. You know, turn it into a Section 3 to 14th Amendment amnesty vote. That's it. They didn't do that. So all these people now that are running their mouth, and Rachel Maddow is publicizing, all these people who keep talking about Trump, you know, they are not doing the country a service. As they say, hit like and subscribe. I guess it'll keep us in your feed if you hit subscribe, like, I don't know, one of the two. I don't care. The bottom line is this. The history is that these people are, as David Feldman says, some of the dumbest Americans there are. Because the ones who are saying the right way to do things, not only are they not getting publicized, they're getting suppressed. Because every time someone tries to say, you need to look at Section 3 to 14th Amendment, and just, God bless her, Jessica Denson is one of them, that she's just doing it wrong. She's coming across like a ding-dong, so nobody's going to listen to her. But Congress has been sent specifics in writing, by faxes, by email. People have said it, and if they're not hearing it, they need to listen. Because all these people out here running around with their face in the media, Jasmine Crockett, AOC, Bernie Sanders, you know, Camilo Jayapal, you know, Eric Swalwell, Jamie Raskin, not a single one of them is putting forth a solution. So if you ask me, history's going to look back at them and see just how stupid they really were. So